What did I encounter years ago? I have asked this question a couple times in the past, but have never gotten any traction on it. I'm hoping this one gets noticed because I would love to be able to have an explanation for an experience I had about 10 years ago. As I stated, about 10 years ago my neighbors went on vacation and left me to be in charge of their house. I would feed the pets and they would let me use their beautiful in-ground pool when I wanted. This family was good to me, but they had a lot of family issues. They had a ton of money but never seemed happy. The police were called over their house a lot. The dad was having affairs, the mom got really sick and eventually died, and the kids were having issues of their own. Could be relevant to the story. So naturally I had my girlfriends come over at night to swim. It was a perfect night out. It was black with no wind and not a cloud in the sky. We wanted to go for a night swim, so we went over there by ourselves. We couldn't figure out how to turn on the pool lights, but it wasn't a problem, because the moon was so bright in the sky. The pool was pitch black and still, and it almost looked like a mirror with the reflection of the moonlight. The pool was shaped like a peanut. The bottom was shallow, about $4, and the top of the peanut was deep and had a water slide at the end. We swam for about a half an hour in the shallow end. I walked up to her and gave her a hug. As we were hugging, we both heard a noise coming from the deep end of the pool. At first we thought the noise was the water filter gurgling. It sounded strange aloud. It went from silence to this noise very quickly, so it was very startling to us. We both turned our heads to the deep end and saw the silhouette of a head sticking out, or the water at the bottom of the water slide. The dark silhouette was all black with no features. It was shaped exactly like a human head sticking out of the water with a neck that went under the water line. The noise was coming directly from this shape. It almost sounded like heavy breathing, like you would hear from Darth Vader. We looked at it for what was probably about 5 seconds at the most. The visual was one thing, but the hardest part to explain about this experience was the feeling we felt. Both of us felt this gut-wrenching feeling in our stomachs that something was wrong, and that we had to leave now. It made every hair on the back of my neck stand up. It's almost like there was a sense of evil that I felt deep inside. Later on, my girlfriend would describe the same feeling. We looked at this head in the water, looked back at each other in confusion, and then looked back where the head was, and in that split second it was gone. We were crouched in the shallow end, so we stood up to see if someone went under the water to hide. There was no one in the pool with us. No waves in that end, nothing. Just the moonlight on the still pool. We slowly stood up, got out of the pool, grabbed our towels, and ran across the street back to my parents' house. My girlfriend spoke about it for about 10 minutes that night, and then would never let me bring it up again. That family continued on a downward spiral for years until they eventually got a divorce and moved out. A new family moved into that house, and they have seemed fine and drama-free ever since.
My parents were hired by a couple to work on their house as my dad was a general contractor in the early 2000s. That same couple was raising their grandson. Me, being in high school, was hired as a babysitter for the grandson, after months of working there. Not at the same time as my parents would work during the day, and I'd babysit at night. I sat my parents down and told them a few things that made me uncomfortable about that house. I hated that the dogs barked like there was someone around, but no one was there at the house except me and the kid, who was usually asleep at that time. I had a hard time looking into the mirror in one room because I had this visceral feeling something would be looking back at me if I did look. Also, the kid was across the hall and down a ways in a bedroom asleep, and yet I could usually hear something walking in the kitchen on the other side of the house. When the couple sold the house and I helped them move and I was vacuuming one room, I kept having that feeling like when you're playing hide-and-go-seek and you know someone is in the room, but every time I turned to the open, empty closet, there was nothing there. My parents sat stunned. Then my mom turned to my dad, and I vividly remember her saying, "Should we tell her?" And they did. During the day, while working on the house, wind from nowhere would slam doors, although no windows or doors to the outside were open. My parents would hear something laughing in another room. Lastly, in the days the house was being sold, my parents, the couple, and the new owners of the house were in the garage chatting, and the large sliding glass door off one side of the garage started knocking hard, like someone banging it with their fists, except it was completely clear glass and nothing was there. This was a rural house, not near the road where a large truck could shake the house or something when driving by. That is when I knew ghosts were real. I wasn't looking for it, but it fell into my lap. Glad the couple moved to a non-haunted house where I could continue babysitting in peace.
It's one event with 3 different experiences, one from my perspective and 2 more from my parents' perspectives. Backstory. Years ago, my granddad passed away suddenly. Our family went in on a condo for my grandma to live in closer to my dad and his siblings after she moved up. She had to go for an operation that was meant to help with some health issues she was having. The recovery for the operation was meant to take a long time. My first encounter. I was in the shower and getting ready to go see Grandma. I was trying to talk myself out of it when I suddenly felt a very familiar, firm and sturdy hand grip my shoulder. It felt exactly the way my grandpa would grip my shoulders to greet me. I took it as a sign that I had to go see her, so I did. I am glad I went. My dad's encounter. At the same time as my experience in the shower, my parents were at the hospital visiting Grandma. Dad looked across the hall into a different room, and a man who looked exactly like my granddad makes eye contact with my dad, waves at him and then vanishes. The following morning my grandma passed away at the hospital, suddenly and unexpectedly. My mom's encounter. Immediately after my grandma was pronounced dead, my mom decided to take a beat in the bathroom and let what had happened sink in. As she was crying and washing her hands, she heard my grandma say, clear as day, "Hi, I'm okay now. Gramps was here waiting for me and we're together now. We are happy. We are okay and we love you, but we need to go now." We spent months not talking about what we had experienced. One night on vacation I was chatting with my parents and I let them in on what had happened to me. My mom and dad opened up to me about what they had seen. It was strange to know we all experienced similar things at around the same time. It comforted all of us in a way. To me it meant that if there really are no worries after death, then there's no reason to spend time worrying about death while we're alive.
When I was a kid, I used to stay after school sometimes with an elderly neighbor lady who was a widow. I was in early elementary school at the time, and if I even knew that her husband was dead, no details were ever discussed in front of me because of my age. I hated going into her house though. She lived in a Cape Cod-style house where the front door opened into a small foyer, and the stairs to the second floor went up right off the foyer in front of you. The very first time I entered her house, I glanced up and saw a man standing at the top of the steps, looking right down at me. It scared the crap out of me, and every time I came in, I would keep my eyes on the floor and hurry through the foyer as fast as I could go. But I could always feel him there, even if I managed not to see him. I never told anyone about this, and years later, I was talking to my family about these neighbors. It came out that our neighbor's husband had died several years before I began staying with her, and he had passed after suffering a fatal heart attack and falling down those stairs. I like to think he was still there, keeping watch over his wife, who for a while had a young companion to keep her company in the afternoons. I have been able to see spirits all my life, and have many other similar instances of seeing and communicating with spirits that were later corroborated by historical evidence and what others have experienced in the same location.
I didn't see it, but my cat did. I had a friend who was going to come visit my newborn son. They suddenly passed before coming. In the early morning hours we had a phone call and found out what happened. I go to my son's room for his morning bottle, but my cat, an older shelter cat who never growled or showed any aggression in her entire life, was guarding the door to his room. She was puffed, growling and hissing. Her eyes followed something in the air that I couldn't see. She moved to block something from the door. She refused to move. I walked over her and brought out my son. I felt the need to say, "Here he is. It's okay for you to go now." After a few minutes, my cat cautiously came into the room. She crouched and checked everywhere as a scared cat does. A few minutes later, she started grooming like nothing happened. I had this cat for 16 years. She never acted that way again. I've read about the Egyptians and cats being guardians of the underworld. I think they were onto something. Ghosts, spirits. I don't know how you want to define it, but I trust there was something there I couldn't see.
I was probably about 17 years old when it happened. My parents never let us kids go trick-or-treating. They said it was an evil tradition, so we'd stay home and say the rosary instead. On Halloween evening around that same age, my mother, myself, and two of my sisters were at the kitchen table and about to wrap up the final prayers of the rosary, when suddenly there was what we all perceived to be huge crash of thunder. Literally felt like the entire house shook. What none of us were expecting, though, and to this day still talk about, were the 3 extremely loud foot stomps that ensued immediately after the thunder, as if a heavy boot was stomping the upstairs floor. 1, 2, then a third, but there was nobody else in the house. And no further thunder either. Clear skies outside, because that was the only place we all thought to run to was the backyard through the sliding doors beside the kitchen table after the stomps. We were all terrified. Finally, we all mustered the courage to re-enter the home, but not before I grabbed a baseball bat from outside and then searched around the entire house. We were all convinced there was someone upstairs or somewhere else in the house. We all still talk about it sometimes. It was a pretty significant event.